UFC Fight Night Rio, Oliveira versus Gamrot takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Luan Lacerda versus Saimon Oliveira. I know this is a crazy thing to say and to judge a fight based on, but Saimon Oliveira just doesn't seem that tough. He seems a little bit soy, in my opinion, compared to Luan Lacerda. I think Luan Lacerda's got a little bit of a toughness advantage. I know they've both lost in the UFC so far. They've both had some pretty bad UFC stints as of so far in their career. Saimon Oliveira's on a losing streak. He's lost to Tony Gravely. He lost to Daniel Marcos, got kneed to the body and the head up against the cage and broken really badly. He also lost in his last fight to Martinez, got finished in the first round. Martinez is good though, but I'm noticing a lot of finishes on the side of Saimon Oliveira. And then Luan Lacerda on the other side lost to Cody Stamann. And he also lost in his last fight as well to Damon Blackshear by finish as well. But I don't mind the Damon Blackshear loss as much as some of the losses on Saimon Oliveira's record. He just seems quite easy to break, Saimon Oliveira. He's 5'4" for the bantamweight division. That's pretty small. I think he's really about 5'5", but still, he's a little bit small for the bantamweight division. He's a little bit frail. I think Luan Lacerda's a little bit more tough and game. And Luan Lacerda's training out of a better gym, Novia União, which I think is a better gym than Saimon Oliveira's Team Astra. But that's not the only thing I'm going off of here. I think Luan Lacerda, he's taken 2 years. He lost his first 2 fights. He hasn't fought since like 2023. This is some time off for him to develop. It shows me he's taking his career very seriously. Saimon Oliveira is just, I've seen him breaking up against the cage. And it's one of those things where if you want to trust a fighter to win and be able to duke it out if the going gets tough, I just don't feel like I can trust Saimon Oliveira to do that. He had a good showing on the Contender Series against that guy like Jose Aldo or something like that. It sounded like Jose Aldo, but he wasn't even that good. He ended up going on to lose some fights as well. And even that was very close. So I'm going to go over Luan Lacerda getting this one done. I think he's likely to get a finish here by TKO or submission in the later rounds, wherever the thing ends up. But I'm going to go over late rounds finish for Luan Lacerda. I think he's just a little bit better than Saimon Oliveira and way tougher and way harder to finish in my opinion as well. So I'm going with Luan Lacerda to kick off the card. But before we move on up the card, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks.com. Use code GURU at PrizePicks.com and new users can play $5 and get $50 instantly in lineups. And that's if you use code GURU. You have to use code GURU to do it. You don't have to, but I'd really prefer you use code GURU to do it, in my opinion. But this is what I'm going for here. I'm going for Julia Polastri to fight for more than 2.5 total rounds against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. We're going to see a 29-28 classic decision there. And I'm going to take Mateusz Gamrot to fight for less than 3.5 total rounds against Charles Oliveira. You could also go with some other things like Vitor Petrino fighting for more than 1.5 rounds. I wouldn't. I'm going to go with these two. We move on back with the rest of the card and the rest of the breakdown, picking things back up with Julia Polastri versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I just mentioned it then for the Prize Picks thing. I think this is going to go to a decision. And I reckon Julia Polastri is going to get this one done over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. There was a time not long ago, probably about 3 fights ago, I'd say, before her last recent losses, where I thought Karolina Kowalkiewicz was kind of fraud checking a lot of these girls. You know what I mean? She was still in there. She had some hands. She was doing some good work in the striking. I think she beat up on Vanessa Demopoulos, I'm pretty sure, who isn't good at all, by the way. Really, really bad. Only won by robbery in her career, pretty much, other than one finish that she got. One of the worst women's fighters we've had on the roster recently. But still, Karolina Kowalkiewicz showed that Aunt has still got it. I would say Unk, but this is the women's version. We're pushing 40 now. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying. It is a reality. We're getting up there now. We're getting to 40. And I know she was somewhat good, but Julia Polastri, she's been here with Lupita Godinez, who I think is a pretty capable women's MMA fighter that she lost to. She's got some wins as well. She got a win over Corey McKenna, who was a decent women's MMA prospect, or at least she was thought to be. And she ended up losing to Julia Polastri. So I'm going to trust in Julia Polastri to get this one done by decision. Maybe 30-27, maybe 29-28. The problem I have with Karolina Kowalkiewicz, And it's going to sound very offensive to say this, but it's just how it is. I don't know if anyone has felt the same way about her last 2 fights. I feel like I'm watching my nan get beat up in there, and it's tough, man. And she's not that bad. Like, I'm not saying it's like a look thing, but just the way she's been fighting recently is that of someone who's completely over the hill. You know what I mean? It's like the Ricky Glenn of women's MMA. When she was getting battered around, and listen, she's had some decent showings, and I don't think she's been finished recently, so I am going to go over decision here. But I just feel like she hasn't been putting any sting in her punches. She's kind of been closing her eyes and wincing when she gets hit by shots as well. And that's just not something I see happening with Julia Polastri here. She's in Brazil. She's looking to make a statement. I think at this point, Karolina Kowalkiewicz is seeing this as a bit of an excuse to have a nice holiday to Brazil. So I'm going to go to Julia Polastri here, getting it done over 40-year-old Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who's way past her prime, in my opinion. So yeah, Palastri's going to get this one done by 29-28 decision. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Valter Walker versus Mohammed Usman. I'm going with Valter Walker here over Mohammed Usman. This is weird matchmaking, in my opinion. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way. But Valter Walker, like he's been getting a lot of these layups. And Mohammed Usman is a step up compared to some of his previous competition. But he's been getting a lot of these. You know what I mean? Where he's been going straight for the leg every single time. And to be fair to him, he's been getting the leg every single time. Now, Mohammed Usman is an odd one. A very, very odd one. I had an itchy ear there for a second. But we're good. He's a very odd one, Mohammed Usman, because I've never seen someone... Listen, he got a KO once in his career. I want to say he put down Zach Poalga or something like that at one point, or maybe there was a close decision with him, but he does have a KO that you go, oh, that was a KO from Mohammed Usman. I've never seen someone so desperate to lose 29-28 decisions. Now, I think that Valter Walker's going to get his leg lock off here and his heel hook that he's been getting on everyone recently in the heavyweight division. Since his loss to Lucas Burskin, which is aging really badly, but he looked awful in his debut compared to the shape he's been in his recent fights. He looked completely out of shape for his debut. So I actually thought that he was on the sauce on the regional scene and then came into the UFC and just hopped off cycle. That's how it looked to me. But seeing as he's back in form, maybe he's taking it more serious. Maybe the debut was on less than ideal circumstances for him. He's been on a streak of latching up the legs and getting these guys out of there. And there's a trick who's no joke. You know what I mean? That's a light man's skill, even though he's probably the same height and weight as Mohammed Usman. Not height and weight, the same weight as Mohammed Usman. I'm going to go against Mohammed Usman, man. He's so scared. He's pussy. Unfortunately, that is what it is. He's just so scared. He's backing up. He's worried. It looks like there's a snake in front, like he's got a phobia of something in the octagon in front of him. Just really jittery. I think even Petersen ended up beating him recently, which is a really bad look. And he's going to be up there on the card as well in a second. But I don't like... No, not Petersen beat him. But he's had some real stinkers where I've just been like, what are you doing out there? You're scared to get hit. You're throwing your arms up in front of you. You're trying to be this technical heavyweight. But it's going to go to the dogs eventually. And Valter Walker is a dog. He's going to march across and get what he wants and go for that leg. And I'm going to go with Valter Walker getting that leg and getting Mohammed Usman out of there in the first round by submission. So I'm going to take Valter Walker to win this one. I think he would even like probably leg lock a Tybura at this point. You know what I mean? Who is... Even though he's been made easy work of by Ante Delija now, he is a decent fraud check in heavyweight, and he's fraud checked a couple people up the top of this card as well that we're going to talk about in a second. I'm going to go with Valter Walker, though. I think this should be higher up on the card, to be honest with you. I think they should get behind Valter Walker here. He's more promotable than the other Brazilian heavyweights and the other guys that are on this card as well that are on the up-and-coming. 14-1, built for it, 6'5", 6'6", massive for the division. And he's got something that he excels in. Mo Usman is just an athlete. And I don't think he's a fighter. I think Usman's a fighter. Mohammed Usman's the athlete. Larger than his brother, Kamaru Usman. You should have gone to the NFL, brother. You know what I mean? That's what your aim should be. And I feel like maybe he fell short of that. And now he's trying to follow in Kamaru Usman's footsteps. It just doesn't... It's not the same. He's not the same level of fighter. And I don't think he has that in him. So... He's a little tentative. I don't really know what he does well. Sometimes his boxing looks okay for a heavyweight, but even then, the bar's been raised. It's not Ante Delija level boxing, and even he's not got the best boxing in the division. So I'm going to go with Valter Walker getting this one done with his signature heel hook submission in round one. We move on Lucas Rocha versus Stewart Nicoll. I'm going to go with Stewart Nicoll, and it's sad, but Lucas Rocha's just too small for flyweight, in my opinion. Too small for flyweight. I'm going to go with Stewart Nicoll. And I don't know why. These are some of these fights, man, where you're like, oh yeah, they're still on. These guys are on the roster. There's a few of them on this one. Stewart Nicoll got guillotined by Jesus Aguilar. He took him down before that, had some good control over him, landed a couple shots. He was doing all right on the feet before that as well. Got caught in a guillotine by Jesus Aguilar, who, to be fair, does have a really nasty guillotine. I think he nearly caught Tatsuro Taira in it as well. And Taira actually had some panic on his face, like, oh god, this guillotine's in. Managed to escape it, out-grapple Aguilar, and eventually beat him. But I think Jesus Aguilar's pretty underrated. I just picked him as an underdog on one of the previous cards, and he pulled it off as well. Lucas Rocha's fought nobody good, man. And he's lost his fights. I don't like this for Lucas Rocha, man. I think Stewart Nicoll's a little too physical for him. I think he'll be able to get top position, grapple well, grapple offensively. On the feet, I think he's going to do all right as well. I trust the Australian factor. I know that's pretty crazy to say, but they are pretty good at fighting these days. Unless they're Shannon Ross. No offense. No offense. I'm taking shots. Or Shane Young. We're just chucking a couple in so no one feels lonely with my attacks. So I'm going to go with Stewart Nicoll. I'm going to trust in his grappling here. I think he'll be able to out-physicality Lucas Rocha, who for a small 5'3" guy is just not the explosive athlete I need him to be to make up for the fact that he's 5'3" for the flyweight division, which is very short for the division. So I'm going to go with Stewart Nicoll. Little bit of physicality, muscle advantage, strength advantage. Even though Lucas Rocha's got experience, it's pretty yucky, useless experience. I'll go Stewart Nicoll. He fought a decent undefeated 5-0 guy before he got to the UFC. Got caught in a guillotine in his debut. Shit happens, lad. We're going to recover. You know what I mean? We're going to recover, and we're going to get a nice decision win. Or maybe a later round submission. Maybe a TKO to ground and pound. Something that will come from his physicality and his grappling skill over Lucas Rocha. I'm going with Stewart Nicoll getting this one done. We move on. Bia Mesquita versus Irena Alekseeva. I'm going with Bia Mesquita. She's like 5-0. She's an ATT women's prospect. She's a great grappler. She was at IBJJF Worlds. I think she won a title in it as well. Like, she's won a lot of accolades in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's a great grappler. I remember her being on like UFC Fight Pass on the grappling events that they would have. And she like submitted Miesha Tate. And then Jennifer Myers, like a legit Jiu-Jitsu women's fighter. Or at least was in her prime. But she's still got the jiu-jitsu base. You're not going to lose that with a bit of age. And Bia Mesquita ended up beating her in a jiu-jitsu match as well. So she's faced a lot of good women in these grappling matches and in these off ones. And I think there's another one on her record somewhere, a name that you would recognize that I can't quite remember. But she's gone through a lot of them. And I think Irena Alekseeva is going to lose here. You know, she caught a knee bar once over Stephanie Egger, which is pretty impressive. Egger is a judoka, so she's not too slouchy in the grappling herself. But since then, Irena Alekseeva, she lost to Melissa Mullins. She lost to that hot woman, Polish hot woman. I can't remember, not Daria Zalesniakova, but a similar name to like that, who lost to Melissa Mullins and got finished by her. So she's worse than the person who was worse than Melissa Mullins, who she already lost to. That's a chain of command. You know what I mean? That's the food chain of women's MMA right there. She's beneath what she's already considered to be beneath. So she's actually, turns out she's lower than beneath what we once thought she was beneath. Okay? If that made any sense. She's double beneath what I thought she was. Because she lost to the one that's lesser than the one she lost to. That's a better explanation. Bia Mesquita's a great grappler. She's at ATT. The last woman to beat Irena Alekseeva is also training out of ATT. I can't remember her name, Daria or something like that. She's a Polish woman, I think. She also trains out of ATT. So they just beat Irena Alekseeva with a woman from their gym. And now they've got the next one up in the very next matchup against the same opponent. It's very likely to lead towards Bia Mesquita. So I'm going to go with her to win this one by submission in the first or second round, maybe a decision with her grappling, but I'm leaning towards a submission here. That's what I think I'll go with. So I'm going to go with Bia Mesquita by submission over Irena Alekseeva in the first or second round. We move on. Vitor Petrino versus Thomas Petersen. Now we're going to play a game called Look at the fucking state of the pair of them compared to each other. That's the game we're going to play. Okay, and it's a good game because it works nearly 100% of the time. There's very rare chances it doesn't work. And then Joe Rogan says, you don't even need muscle, because Andy Ruiz fluked to win over Anthony Joshua by catching him when Joshua was going for a finish. And all of a sudden, Joe Rogan comes up with this hypothesis that muscle isn't even needed, even though most fighters are shredded and in great shape. I love it when one outlier to the rule, just one exception to the rule, just changes the rule itself for everyone. I don't know how that works, but I'm looking at Vitor Petrino winning this one, guys. He's larger, he's bigger than Thomas Petersen, and one thing I like about it here is that Thomas Petersen can grapple a little bit. He won his last fight mixing and grappling against Don'Tale Mayes, who is a big-for-nothing shit fighter. I think I even picked Don'Tale Mayes to win. Petersen ended up out-grappling him quite a lot. So that was kind of shocking to me as well. But other than catching Arlovski with that one punch, Don'Tale Mayes has pretty much achieved nothing in the sport himself. But Vitor Petrino, even though he stuck his head in a guillotine against Anthony Smith, which was maybe the silliest move I've ever seen made in an MMA fight, I never would pick a guy fraud-checked by Anthony Smith. But I'm going to make an exception here. I'm going to go against Thomas Petersen. I'm going to go with Vitor Petrino. I reckon he's got this one in the bag. I reckon he's going to catch this one. And I also liked in his last fight against Austin Lane, he took down Lane and submitted him in round 1 with a rear naked choke and showed great control in mount and great jiu-jitsu. He's got good grappling instincts. And he's not going to be lost on the ground with Thomas Petersen. And he's not going to... I think he could grapple offensively here and submit Thomas Petersen. You know what I mean? And Thomas Petersen's been KO'd by the great Shamil Gaziev. There's no shame in losing to the GOAT. The future GOAT, at least. You know, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But Vitor Petrino's more powerful on the feet. He's in shape. He's not a fat sack of shit. He should win this one. And he's got good grappling as well to go with it. So if Petersen does decide to mix in a bit of wrestling and think that's going to save him, I think he's got a rude awakening. So I'm going to go with Vitor Petrino. TKO finish in the first round over Thomas Petersen. He'll be comfortable. Maybe he'll shuck off a takedown early, gain some confidence, and then put Thomas Petersen away by vicious KO. I'm going with Vitor Petrino getting this one done. Shock twist. We move on. Jafel Filho versus Clayton Carpenter. Man. Has anyone else never recovered from Jafel Filho nearly catching Mohammed Makayev in their grappling exchanges so many times? He nearly had him on a few occasions. I know Mohammed Makayev eventually came back to submit him, but I think Jafel Filho ripped his knee out of place in their fight with a knee bar. Even had a close submission in round 1. I'm pretty sure Makayev was down 0-2 in that fight against Jafel Filho, who just lost to Alan Nascimento, who I think is a really solid grappler himself. Clayton Carpenter's good as well. He might be a tad inexperienced for this one, and it's a risky pick. But I'm going to go with Jafel Filho here over Clayton Carpenter. Clayton Carpenter is good. He lost to Tagir Bekov in his last fight. He won over some like Juan Camilo Ronderos, who was like 4-1. Shouldn't have ever been in the UFC in the first place. And he finished him in the second round. And he's had some decent performances and some decent finishes. And he has been touted as a prospect for the division. But I think he's a little bit green. And I think he does not enough in a lot of occasions. And with the Brazilian crowd and with the submission attempts advantage that I think Jafel Filho has, I reckon he's going to get more ooh and ah moments. Even if he doesn't get a submission, the fact that it might be locked in for a second. We're looking at a very low output fight here, by the way. Very low output fight. Not going to be many significant strikes, in my opinion. A lot of grappling where one guy's on the other guy's on the other. A lot of reversals, moments here and there. And I just think Jafel Filho, a little bit rangier on the feet, a little bit taller, a little bit more spindly in the grappling. Clayton Carpenter's a physical guy. He's very strong for the division, but I think the slickness and the technicality in the grappling is an advantage for Jafel Filho here. I reckon he's got the advantage in that region of the fight. So I'm going to go with Jafel Filho. I don't see how you can nearly snatch up a few submissions on Makayev and be 2-0 up against him, who's a great grappler, Makayev, by the way. And not be able to snatch one up on Clayton Carpenter. Tagir Bekov's all right, but I don't think he's that good. I don't think he's that good at flyweight, and he ended up beating Clayton Carpenter in a reasonably competitive fight as well, by the way, but Carpenter got 1 takedown on him. Tagir got 3 on him. Both guys picked at each other on the feet. Very low output stuff. So I think those types of fights where it's low output and not much is going on, it goes to the guy who gets the back. It goes to the guy who jumps the guillotine. It goes to the guy who rolls for a leg and nearly has it at the end of one of the rounds, or nearly has an armbar at one point off bottom position. And I think all of those moments will belong to Jafel Filho. So I'm going to go with Jafel Filho getting this one done. I think they're near evens here, but I think a lot of people are going with Carpenter. So I'm going to go with Jafel Filho. Not because a lot of people are going with Carpenter, because I believe in Jafel Filho getting this one done in Brazil. I think he'll get this one by close decision. 29-28, based on a few moments. Maybe even an armbar. I could see an armbar here as well. Or maybe he rolls for a leg. Submission, close decision based on those submission attempts. This could look like a bit like a better version of Patchy Mix versus Jakub Wicklacz, but where Wicklacz wins a little clearer than he did. So I'm going to go with Jafel Filho getting this one done. We move on. Lucas Almeida versus Michael Aswell. As well as who? I'm joking. I'll start. It's a silly joke. I'm going with Lucas Almeida. Michael Aswell is the favorite here. He's a slight favorite. And he had a decent scrap with Balagiocchi, who I don't think is all that. I think he's breakable. And the fact that he was able to still have an output of 60 or 50, 40-something, late 40-something significant strikes in round 3 against Michael Aswell is worrying, because it tells me that what are your shots doing if they're not breaking Balagiocchi? I'm sorry. That is how I feel about it, man. I think Balagiocchi is good, but he ain't built for war like that. He's a talented guy, and he had a good scrap with Michael Aswell. But Aswell has lost a lot recently, and I don't think Balagiocchi's all that, and I never have thought he was all that, even though he was a touted prospect. I've always thought he looked a bit frail and breakable. And Aswell couldn't do it, and he shouldn't even be in the UFC. I'm just being real. Lost to Bogdan Grad on the Contender Series by split decision. It was close. It was debatable, I get it. But then he went back to the regional scene, won a split decision against a bum who was like 8-3, now 8-4, hasn't really done anything since. I think he might be now 8-5, and lost since that last fight. And then came back into the UFC to lose to Balagiocchi. Even before, I think this guy lost to DeVale, who's a prospect in a division right now from Cuba. And he lost to him on the regional scene by unanimous decision. I think he's lost 3 out of his last 5 fights. Yet here he is. And I know Lucas Almeida ain't any better. You know, he's been KO'd by Andre Filho in a fight. But he also had a very close fight with Danny Silva by split decision. That was a very close fight. Now, he missed weight for that fight, but it was a very close and competitive fight. And I like Danny Silva because Danny Silva gave Kevin Vallejos a real challenge. And I think Vallejos is good. I know a lot of people might be saying, oh, you're hyping him up because he's Jerusalem affiliated. And he is. Vallejos, we are Jerusalem affiliated. This is very obvious. And Vallejos is as well. But I think Vallejos is all right. Do I think he's going to be a world champion on his first run to the top? You know what I mean? It remains to be seen based on his next few performances. And I need to see some improvement from him. But I don't think he's bad. Like, he's a lot better than Michael Aswell as a prospect and Almeida as a prospect. And Almeida had a great scrap with Danny Silva. So I'm going to trust in Lucas Almeida. He's been around. He's got a lot of experience. He's larger than Michael Aswell. He's got more reach. I don't think Michael Aswell has the power to put him away. So they're going to get scrappy. And Almeida's had some scraps. He's had UFC scraps. He's had good performances in the UFC. Some wins in the UFC. I think him and, if I'm not mistaken, it was him and the Cowboy from The Ultimate Fighter. I can never remember the guy's name, but they got like a double knockdown on each other and had a great scrap with each other at one point. I think if this gets into a dogfight, I'm going to go with Lucas Almeida getting this one done. I think he's more experienced in the fight. And Aswell's just been making it too close. He lost to Oki, split decision on the regional scene to get him back in the UFC. For what? Was supposed to be back in June or something. Ended up getting signed for this. Got taken off a fight on the regional scene in June to be on in the UFC. And then lost on the Contender Series to Bogdan Grad, who I don't think is all that either. It's a strange one. This whole card's full of strange ones. But I think these are incorrect odds. So I'm going to go with Luke. Andre Filho is all right, you know. He is all right. Isn't he like a fraud checker of sorts? Like, if you put him in there against Andre Filho and they aren't quite ready, you'll get him. You know what I mean? He will get him. And he'll have a good performance, or he'll, like, win a close decision against some decent prospect. So I'm going to go with Lucas Almeida. I'm going to go with Lucas Almeida getting this one done by finish or by 29-28 decision over Michael Aswell as an underdog. We move on. Ricardo Ramos versus Khan Offley. I have a rule never to pick Ricardo Ramos because the guy's lost, 4 out of his last 5. The one that he won was so weird as well because he fought Joshua Kalibau. And if you look at the stats and rewatch the fight, I don't know how he gets that fight. He had a close submission in one of the rounds that could give him the round. I thought Kalibau won that fight, and he dropped Ramos in that fight as well. So I don't know about Ramos because he hasn't won in like 5 fights, in my opinion. So he shouldn't be here. But Khan Offley shouldn't be either. He lost on tough. Got KO'd in the finals against Mayron Santos, who I do think is decent. I know people say he robbed his last opponent, but I do think he's a great fighter with a lot of talent and a lot of power, so I'm not going to blame Offley too bad for that loss. I'd really regret picking off. I'd feel like an idiot if I picked Offley and he lost. Because Ricardo Ramos fought Shep Mariscal, and even though he was getting whooped in the first 2 rounds and he started to look like he was breaking, he came back and had a pretty decent 3rd round for himself. Khan Offley made it very close with Mohammed Naimov, who, even though cheated in moments, got the better of Nathaniel Wood in moments in the grappling. And I think Khan Offley might be able to work. I don't want to pick too many underdogs, though. You know what I mean? It's a tricky one, man. Khan Offley's got good pressure. He's strong. He's a decent wrestler. He's lost a lot, but so has Ramos. And Ramos is so untrustworthy with his grit and determination and decision-making in fights that he does as well. He reminds me a bit of a slightly more high testosterone Claudio Puelles, but without the level of skill that comes along with it. I'm going to go with Khan Offley's control. It hurts. That actually hurts to say. I'm worried about that one. But Ramos, I just can't trust. And Offley did make it close with Naimov, and Naimov got a couple takedowns on him, but other than that, I think Offley hit a reversal at one point, got on top position for a bit, held him up against the cage. It was a bit of a nothing fight, to be honest with you, but I think if he can work that grinding game against Ricardo Ramos, he looked good on the Ultimate Fighter, in my opinion. Won both of his fights, and he looked like he would go on to maybe win the show. And, he beat Nathan Fletcher, who I know isn't all that and is now probably not even going to be in the UFC for much longer. Got beaten by Rinya Nakamura with a body kick in his last fight and lost to Cowlin Lochran, who just lost, but he out-grappled him quite convincingly, I'm going to go with Khan Offley. I'm going to say that Khan Offley can pressure and break Ricardo Ramos. And I think he's more durable. I know he got KO'd by Mayron Santos. I don't see Ramos KOing him. So I'm going to take another underdog here. I'm going to go with we're going underdogs. I'm going with another underdog of Khan Offley. I've got a weird feeling that I would hate if I ignored. Because I've had some weird feelings that I've ignored. Like Pereira beating Ank. Everyone was going with Pereira. I felt left out. I was like, am I missing something? I feel like I should have gone with Pereira. This isn't like me picking Ankalaev. Logic, you know what I mean? He won the first fight. Sometimes you got to go off that buzz and that feeling with these fights. And I know a lot of people are going with Ramos here, but I'm going to go with Khan Offley. Just being slightly worse than Mohammed Naimov, I think makes you better than Ricardo Ramos. In my opinion. I think Naimov would out-grapple Ramos quite convincingly. So I'm going to go with Khan Offley getting this one done. Very close decision. That's what I think. Very close decision. I'm going to bet on the control time of him. I think he'll get more control time than Ricardo Ramos. Get on top, land some little punches. And I don't think Ramos has got it. He'll be on the back foot too much. And I think that's a bad look as well. I know Khan Offley's going to lead the dance. I know he's going to be looking for his takedowns. I don't know what Ramos is going to show up. And if you don't count his win over Joshua Kalibau, he hasn't won in 5 UFC fights. And he's getting up there. I know he's big for the division-ish. He's getting up there now. He's been around. He's had damage to him. He had that nasty spinning elbow at one point, didn't he? But yeah, I'm going to go against Ramos, man. 0 for 5, in my opinion, in his last 5. I know Offley's lost 2, but that's too many UFC losses for me to count this guy as a winner in anything. So I'm going to go with Khan Offley, getting this one done, 29-28 decision. We move on. Jonata Diniz versus Mario Pinto. I'm going to go with another underdog here. I'm going to go with Jonata Diniz over Mario Pinto, guys. He's got a kickboxing background, a bit of a better one than Mario Pinto. Mario Pinto's probably the better prospect on paper because he's 10-0, undefeated, hasn't lost yet. KO'd Austin Lane in his last fight with a nasty KO. But the way I see this fight, I think this is going to be a striking match. That is no doubt in my mind. Jonata Diniz does the simple stuff better than Pinto does. Pinto gets wild with his combos and his punches. I think Diniz is a little tougher than him, but he didn't look good against Alvin Hines. But Alvin Hines was an undefeated prospect, but he's fat. But Pinto was kind of getting his ass handed to him by Austin Lane. But Diniz was getting taken down by Lane, got back up, smoked him on the feet out cold. They both knocked him out cold. But Pinto was getting done up on the feet a bit. He kept good control, but he was getting pressured on the feet and backed up on the feet. Diniz was in full control on the feet in the Austin Lane fight. Couple hairy moments, but when they were on the feet, he was tucked up, strong, held his ground, stood his base, backed up. Austin Lane slept him against the cage. Pinto kind of caught Austin Lane swinging at him with his chin in the air with like a wild hook counter combo. And I think this is going to be a stand-up match. And Diniz is heavier. He's got a 10-pound weight advantage. He's got a half-inch reach advantage. And I think he's better down the pipe. Jabs, twos, stern jabs. Mario Pinto swings with hooks and combos and had a nasty KO on the Contender Series as well. And it looks great. But I can see Diniz sticking a jab on him with his chin tucked. That's something about Diniz I really respect, is how tucked his chin is. I don't see hooks spinning the jaw of Diniz here. I see him backing up Mario Pinto. I think he's more durable. I know he lost to Marcin Tybura and got battered, but he never went out. He got cut open and he couldn't move, and eventually they had to call it off. I think he's tougher. There is a lean with the Brazilian judges because the crowd's going to be going nuts anytime a Brazilian does anything. I'm going to go with Jonata Diniz getting this one done by TKO. I think it's an upset. I think it's another underdog I'm going for here. I'm going to trust in his jab and his two and his tucked chin and his stance, and he'll be pushing forward and Pinto will be moving around and trying to land hooks on the counter and stuff. And I think Diniz is going to stick it on him. A little bit of a Walmart Pavlovich type style over Mario Pinto. I want to believe in Pinto though. He's undefeated, 10-0. If he wins this, he'll be 11-0. We'll have another prospect on our hands. But I'm going to go with Diniz. I'm going to trust in Diniz. His training, his kickboxing pedigree, his background in kickboxing at Glory. He's got some nasty KOs at Glory. He was hyped up as a prospect. Tybura taught him the ropes. Sometimes Tybura gets him. Gets on top, finds the takedown. The experience kicks in and he's got him. But I'm going to go with Jonata Diniz getting this one done. He's had the wake-up call. Sometimes every heavyweight needs that wake-up call. Especially when they're not a supreme athlete like Tom Aspinall or like Sergey Pavlovich. But even he had it against Overeem, which isn't the same as Tybura, but I'm going to go with Diniz. I think he's too tough. A little bit more powerful with simpler shit. Pinto might swing harder and get nastier KOs in his MMA career so far. But Diniz is a lot tighter and more tucked in. So I'm going to go with Jonata Diniz getting this one done. TKO over Mario Pinto in the first 2 rounds. We move on. Up the card. Vicente Luque versus Joel Alvarez. I'm going to go with Joel Alvarez over Vicente Luque. And I'm going to take him by finish. I don't know what way it's going to come. I don't know if it's going to be a TKO that leads to a ground and pound finish, or if it's going to be a TKO sequence that leads to a guillotine once Luque shoots in, or a submission once Luque shoots in, or a guillotine up against the cage like he caught on Drakkar Close, which was a really nasty finish as well. I think he even punched him out cold while he had him in a guillotine. But I'm going to trust in Joel Alvarez. I've always believed in him as a prospect. I know he lost to Arman Sarukian. That's no shame. No shame in losing to Arman. I like him at welterweight here, man. The reach advantage, 6'2". I think he's 6'3" really as well. He's a tall dude. I think he's right there matched up with Jalen Turner for the same size. I like this for him. He's got a lot behind him as well. They want to do an event in Spain. I think he knows he wants this win. So he's ready to be on that Topuria card, where Topuria might fight Gaethje on the Paramount card in January, and they're going to have him on there as well, and similar promotion and build up, and little shake hands with Topuria on Embedded, like, you know, como está, you know, I mean, all this type of shit. No hablo español, no hablo inglés. I'm going to go with Joel Alvarez. Getting this one done. Luque is, you know, he beat Temba Garimbo. The loss to Buckley was worrying to me because of his brain. Holland put him away. D-Rod just beat Holland. You know? D-Rod did just beat Holland. And Luque was supposed to fight Ponzinibbio. And now he's got Joel Alvarez. That's a difference, man. That's a difference. I bet you Luque was thinking, oh, thank God, a freebie. It's Ponzinibbio. I'll chin him. You know what I mean? He ain't going to finish me, and he's so chinny, I'll put him away. Joel Alvarez is a different opponent to Ponzinibbio, man. Ponzinibbio's all step in with the same stuff, bit of footwork, jabs, simple stuff, jab, two. Joel Alvarez is good with his kicks at range, with his front kicks up the middle and his knees in the clinch and his submission attempt as well that he can jump out of nowhere. Lighter man skill. Dude's 22-3. And he's fought good comp. He fought Demiris Magulov on the come up as well. And that was a good opponent at the time when they were both prospects on the come up. I just think he's good, man. I think he's really good. And I would have loved to have seen him stay at lightweight, but I think he knows that if he wants to be at lightweight, he can't make weight if he's injured. If he's injured in his training camp, he ain't making weight because he has to be perfect to make that weight class. And also, he can't take opportunities at lightweight like he just did for this one with Luque because he can't make the weight on short notice enough. He can't stay active because he can't make the weight consistently enough. It's been a problem for him. So this isn't a guy who's just doesn't like the weight cut or is just not having success at lightweight, so he's moving up. This is a guy who is good at lightweight, could be a top contender at lightweight, but he's literally too big for the division. So I'm going to go with Joel Alvarez getting this one done in his welterweight debut. It's a tough test against Luque, but he's getting up there in age. One of my favorite fighters of all time, Luque. If you never knew about his run when he was on the come up before he fought Wonderboy, and even some fights after Wonderboy as well, in the build up to it, he had so many wars. But in that sense, there are a lot of wars in there. Brian Barberena, you got to clutch out a win in round 3. Even during the synchronized sneezing of the world, so I don't get demonetized here. Even during the synchronized sneezing of the world in 2020 on Fight Island, Nico Price was having a scrap with him. And I know these guys were somewhat good, but I just think if we're getting scrappy, Joel Alvarez will get scrappy and then find a finish in that. If he's starting to have success, he will find a finish from it. So I'm going to go against Vicente Luque here. It always hurts me to do it. One of my favorite fighters of all time. But Joel Alvarez is good. Very talented. Lighter man skill. Built for this division, in my opinion. We'll see how he looks on fight week. That'll really reaffirm my confidence in him. But I'm going to believe in Joel Alvarez. I'm going to believe in Joel Alvarez up at 170 against Luque. And I don't even think this is a hot take, but on short notice in a new weight class, it is interesting, right? So I'm going to go with Alvarez, and I'm going to take him by finish. TKO. I'll say he wins this one by TKO finish. We move on. Davison Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson. This is a weird one to me because Montel Jackson, I spoke about him before. Listen, I made a video on Montel Jackson on the channel. My God, this hair's been pissing me off all day. I got to trim my attache. I made a video on Montel Jackson in 2019. And I said prospect spotlight. I was pointing out young up-and-comers in the sport. I pointed out Cyril Gahn, Kevin Holland, some of these other guys who were coming up, who were making their debut, and who I thought were going to be something someday. And I got a lot of them right. I got a lot of decent ones. There were some that faded out. I remember I had like Manny Bermudez in there. And sometimes I just started doing it eventually. Later on in this series, I just started doing it for like prospects to add some hype. I remember I did it for some like reality TV show star at one point. So it kind of lost its meaning. But when I was doing it about Montel Jackson, it was to find a prospect in the sport. And I don't think he is all that. I don't think Montel Jackson's going to be a world champion. Because he did make it look real shitty against Daniel Marcos. And it's a really dull fight and things. He knocked out Damon Blackshear in the first round with a nasty finish. But then there's other times when he takes JP Bays to a decision but knocks him down like 6 times. So I think at times he's not as urgent. He doesn't have good enough finishing instincts. He also is injured quite a bit, so it's hard for him to stay active. But he's been pretty active for himself recently. The guy hasn't lost since like 2021. Around then, I think he lost to Ricky Simone and Brett Johns. Both out-grappled him in fights that he arguably could win on damage, by the way, if you watch them back. They controlled him against the cage and got some takedowns. But he did do a little bit more on the feet against both of them. And I think he even dropped Ricky Simone or Brett Johns at one point in their fights. But I'm going to take him to beat Figueiredo for this reason. The Figueiredo that fought Corey Sandhagen, who, by the way, tore up his ACL when he's in his 30s. He's getting up there in age, Davison Figueiredo. Not just in his 30s, as in that's old, because Montel Jackson's 32. Or 33, I think. But a lot less miles on the clock. But Davison Figueiredo is in I think he's 37, 38. He's getting up there for a lower weight class guy. And he just ripped apart his leg in the fight with Corey Sandhagen. And that got called off. And now he's back here. He looked like a guy who showed up for a paycheck in his last fight. And I can't shake that image of him. Against Yan, he thought, this is it. If I win this, I could get a title shot. And this is the big win that I need. And he was on a bit of momentum before that, right? And then Yan kind of shut him down, but it was a good scrap. I think that was the last we're going to see out of Figueiredo. And I know it's in Brazil. And Oliveira's the main event. And, there's a lot to gain from him here if he gets a good performance. I just haven't seen the same Figueiredo showing up recently. And I think he traces with his head too much. He scouts punches with his head a little bit too much to pull counter. And against a guy who's got a 7.5-inch reach advantage over him, who's tough, Montel Jackson's not a chinny fighter by any means. He's a tough dude, and he's hard to put away, and he's very hard to grapple against as well. He could slow this fight down and pick apart Davison Figueiredo, in my opinion. So I'm going to go with Montel Jackson here. I'm going to take him by decision, 30-27. I think it's going to be a pretty uneventful fight, but I think he will outstrike Figueiredo across the distance. And we will be wondering, why didn't Figueiredo do enough? Why didn't he wade in? But I think he'll get popped by Jackson if he ever does try and cross the void, to steal a term from Demetrius Johnson. If he ever tries to get across that void, I think Montel Jackson's going to put that pepper on him. And if he really tries to do it aggressively, I could see mustard coming his way. So I got Montel Jackson getting this one done by decision. Daniel Marcos' fight wasn't anything to write home about, but I just don't see the same Figueiredo anymore, man. The last fight against Sandhagen, I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing in this fight? Try and win, please. He was faced with a taller, rangier opponent with a reach advantage, who's better than Montel Jackson, don't get me wrong. Sandhagen is a better striker than Montel Jackson. But I saw Figueiredo go to something where he went for a Hail Mary. In round 2 of the fight, he went for a Hail Mary, going for the legs, constantly putting himself on bottom position, getting beaten up in that position as well. Got his leg ripped apart at 37 or so years of age. It screams of the downfall that's imminent. So I'm going to go with Montel Jackson, getting it done, decision win. We move on up the card to another fight, which is the main event. Charles Oliveira versus Mateusz Gamrot. Ooh. Nobody ever. I'm a big fan of Gamrot, but I think this is where Oliveira hurts him and guillotines him and gets his submission. You know them fights where you look... I've been wanting to switch towards Gamrot, but when this fight was announced, and even when... Listen, Oliveira was saying, I don't want to fight Gamrot. It's a different style. It'll match up for me. I don't really like... But now I think Oliveira was saying, is there no one else? In hindsight, that's probably what Oliveira was meaning, right? Like, is there no other striker at lightweight that wants to step in, Gaethje? Yeah, I'm saying, is there no other striker here? Any lightweight, please, put your hand forward. Anyone in the rankings want to step in? You know, Mauricio Huffy, you want to jump in here, take himself out of that fight with Benoit Saint-Denis? Who's going to jump in? But I think once he realized, okay, there's no other option other than unranked guys, I'll take on Mateusz Gamrot then, okay? It's not my ideal switch up, but if this is the only option, I'm happy to do it. So I kind of jumped the gun on that. But even in that video where I was saying Oliveira's ducking him, what's this statement he's come out with? It's embarrassing, you know, and all of this. Even in that statement I said about him, I even said then, and I think he'd beat Gamrot. So even when my biases of perception of this matchup went a certain way, incorrectly. I still had in my mind that Oliveira was going to win, and I can't switch up on that, even though it's tempting, and he does feel like there's a bit of a changing of the guard going on, and maybe Gamrot will rise to the top here. There's a lot of Gamrot fights that get a little too close for my liking against people that are not Charles Oliveira, man. RDA had him in trouble early at an old age. You know what I mean? Carlos Diego Ferreira was giving him some problems as well. There are people that can deal with that grappling. And Oliveira is going to be comfy in that situation, man. Arman Tsarukyan and Oliveira, the amount of times he nearly caught him in submissions in that fight. Guillotine in round 1, Arman Tsarukyan's shorts fall down. Gamrot and Arman grappled for 5 straight rounds. Some of the best wrestling you'll ever see in MMA. No submission attempts. Nothing getting caught on anyone. Oliveira's that difference. With the guillotines. With the, he nearly had Arman in a triangle at the end of round 2. It was in at the end of round 2. Round 3 had him in a dash choke as well. And he got beaten up in that fight in moments too. The Chandler performance is worrying. And the fact that he got KO'd by Ilia Topuria just a couple of months ago is also very worrying. But Gamrot ain't really a KO guy. You know? And if Dan Hooker's popping back up to his feet and being able to make it close, I thought Gamrot can win that fight. But Hooker did have good moments at the end of the rounds. I still think Gamrot won that fight, though, by the way. So I think if Hooker beats Arman and Gamrot wins this, they should run that back for a title shot, maybe. But I don't think that's either way going to happen. I think Arman beats Hooker because he's really good. And I think Oliveira nearly beat Arman. And I know Gamrot nearly did as well. But I'm going to go with Oliveira here. This reeks of... And this happens a lot in Mateusz Gamrot fights. He gets cracked by a punch... And he drops and he dives in for a takedown with his head on the outside. And it works and it keeps him alive against Beneil Dariush, who doesn't have the reactive submission skills of Charles Oliveira off of like a takedown being shot on him. And by the way, look at the two differences in the performances against Dariush. You know, Dariush was scrambling the hell out of Gamrot. Oliveira got on bottom, worked Dariush off of his back, got back up, smoked him on the feet by TKO in round 1. That's tricky to do in hindsight to Dariush. He's a tricky guy to beat. Then you've also got the other thing with Gamrot. He got rocked by the spinning back fist against Arman and immediately sinks, shoots in. Jalen Turner knocked him down once. Gamrot gets dropped, shoots right in on his hips. Jalen Turner ain't got the submission skills. Then put him off balance in round 2 as well. Gamrot gets sunk, shoots in. RDA rocks him. He gets sunk to the ground, shoots in, gets kneed in the face, nearly gets finished, shoots in again. It just happened too many times to Gamrot throughout his career for me to say that Oliveira is not going to crack him with something mean. And when Gamrot does go to his instinct, which is to wrestle, that guillotine's going to be waiting for him. So I'm taking Charles Oliveira by guillotine submission. Plus, Mateusz Gamrot was in Poland for this. And for a guy whose conditioning is his main weapon, 5-rounders are his main weapon, even though he hasn't had many of them recently. And he did look great against Ludovic Klein, by the way. So maybe he is improving. This isn't a full camp for him, man. He might have been training, but he wasn't training like he had Oliveira coming up. Oliveira was training for Ilia Topuria, willing to step in there against Fiziev, who's very dangerous to take him on. And now he's got Gamrot, and he's staying true to the game. And he's been in the training camp, and he's been back in there. I do worry about him taking this too soon, and maybe Gamrot clips him, and then things change a little bit, and Gamrot starts doing work, and we're all mortified at what's going on. But I'm going to go with Gamrot losing by guillotine. Too many times I've seen him hurt and shoot in that way and not get punished for it. You don't not get punished for that against Oliveira. You're getting guillotined. So I'm going to take Oliveira, get stung up on the feet early maybe, crack Gamrot with some slick shit, maybe catch him around the guard with a hook like Dan Hooker did, where Gamrot sinks to a knee and then shoots right in on Dan Hooker again. And even Hooker nearly had a guillotine at one point, if I remember correctly. This is a different submission skill. And also Gamrot on short notice when his conditioning is his best weapon, and this is a 5-rounder. I'm going to take Oliveira in round 1 or 2 with a submission win by guillotine. That's what it reeks of to me, and I can't shake that vibe from this. So, yeah, I'm going with Charles Oliveira. Gamrot's cool, though. I love him for taking the fight. I love him for saving the event. I think he's one of the most game fighters on the roster. He's called Gamer for a reason, because he is game, and he trains with great fighters. But I'm going to go with Oliveira catching this one. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye. And also, I was worried about Oliveira going to the Apex and flying back, but Gamrot has flown from Poland to ATT to train, to get the fight, to fly to Brazil. It's a lot. It's a lot going on for Gamrot, man. And I don't think Oliveira would be flying to the Apex to coach his guy on the Contender Series a week and a half ago if he was injured. That tells me he's healthy for this fight, because if he was injured, no, you're not going to the Apex to coach your guy. But seeing as things are maybe going well for him, they might go, yeah, go. You know, you want to be there for your guy, go be there for your guy on the Contender Series. They would not let him if something was hurting him. If he needed to recover from something, they're not letting him get on that flight. So I'm going to trust that Oliveira's healthy, aside from that concussion a while ago against Ilia Topuria, which wasn't that long ago. I'm going to say he gets a guillotine win. Like and subscribe. See you later. Goodbye.